There are people who are born with something different. It's not just talent, nor luck, nor effort. It's a combination of all of that mixed with moments no one plans, decisions that aren't always understood at the time, and people who appear along the way to make everything make sense. Billie Eilish is one of those people. Her story is not that of a girl who dreamed of being famous and achieved it by following in the footsteps of others. It is the story of someone who found her own path, even though that path was full of obstacles that no one could see from the outside. To understand who Billie is today, you have to go back to the beginning. Not to the beginning of her fame, but to the beginning of everything. To her family, to her childhood, to the decisions her parents made before she was even aware of what it meant to be an artist. This girl's full name is quite long, and that already says something about her parents. When she was born, they named her Billie Eilish Pirate Baird O'Connell. This happened in December 2001 in Los Angeles, California, a city that for decades has been the cradle of artistic dreams of all kinds. But Billie's childhood was not that of a Los Angeles girl who grew up watching television and following the standards of what a future pop artist is supposed to do. Her parents, Maggie and Patrick, were people with a very marked artistic calling. Maggie was an actress, a screenwriter, and had been a theater teacher. Patrick was an actor and musician. Together they made a decision that would forever shape the lives of their children. They would not send them to a traditional school. Instead, they would homeschool them. This choice was not the product of chance or of a radical ideology. It was a thoughtful decision, built on the conviction that their children, Billie and her older brother Phineas, deserved an education that treated them as complete individuals, not as just more students within a system. An education that would allow them to develop their interests at their own pace, explore art from the inside, and grow up surrounded by creativity instead of standardized tests. And it worked. It really worked. Growing up at home with artist parents meant that music was always present. Not as something studied in a classroom, but as something that simply existed in the family's air. Billie grew up listening to whatever her parents and her brother played on the stereo. The Beatles, Frank Sinatra, Green Day. Completely different genres, different eras, but all with something in common. Authentic emotions expressed through music. Over time, Billie began to find her own preferences. One of the genres that started to catch her attention was hip-hop, with its rhythm, its attitude, and its way of telling stories. But she also developed a strong interest in pop. And it was within pop that she found someone who would mark her in a way she herself took years to fully understand. Justin Bieber became her great idol. It was not a superficial or fleeting admiration. It was something much deeper and more genuine. Billie even found herself wondering things that, for a girl in love with music and with the idea of love, made perfect sense. Whether someday, when she got married, she might feel for someone what she felt for him. It was the kind of intense, unfiltered emotion that only children and artists allow themselves to feel without shame. What Billie didn't know then was that this idol, this singer, who represented for her everything music could do to someone's heart, would be present in one of the most important moments of her career. Maggie and Patrick didn't just give their children freedom, they taught them. Their mother passed on to them the art of expressing themselves before the world, how to write, how to dance, how to connect with an audience without losing authenticity. These were not formal lessons delivered from a blackboard. They were shared moments, conversations, creative exercises that little by little were shaping two artists, without them even realizing it yet. Their father, for his part, opened the door to instruments. He taught them to play the piano and the ukulele. He showed them how notes and lyrics could become something that transcended words. He passed on the idea that composing was not a privilege reserved for geniuses, but a skill that any sensitive person could develop if they had patience, passion, and someone who believed in them. Phineas, the older brother, absorbed all of this and multiplied it. He developed an extraordinary talent for composing and producing music. He participated as an actor in television projects, was part of a band, and gained experience in music production in a way that would, over time, prove to be fundamental. Because Phineas was not only learning for himself, unconsciously, he was learning for his sister as well. While Billie was growing up in that environment of creativity and freedom, something was happening in her body that no one fully understood at first. She began to notice involuntary reactions, movements she couldn't control, physical tics that appeared without her causing them. At first, they were mild, almost imperceptible, but over time they intensified until they could no longer be ignored. After going to the doctor and undergoing several tests, the diagnosis arrived: Tourette syndrome, a neurological disorder that affects voluntary control of movements and sounds, causing physical or vocal tics that the person simply cannot control. These tics tend to intensify during moments of stress or anxiety, which can significantly complicate social life, especially during childhood and adolescence, stages in which environmental pressure can be devastating. For Billie, this diagnosis was a hard blow, not only because it meant living with something beyond her control, but because others didn't always understand it. She herself has said in interviews that some people laughed at her tics, thinking she did them on purpose to be funny or attract attention. They couldn't imagine the pain that caused her. Being misunderstood, being the object of ridicule for something you couldn't avoid, is a kind of wound that isn't visible on the outside but leaves deep marks within. The diagnosis shook her confidence. It affected her self-esteem. It made her feel different in a way that was not welcome. But something unexpected also happened. Music became her most powerful refuge. She started writing songs. Not because someone asked her to, not as an assignment or as part of a plan. She did it because it was the only way she found to express what she felt when the words of everyday language were not enough. And in that process of writing, her brother Phineas was there. What began as a collaboration between siblings who shared the same space and the same sensitivity gradually became something much more serious. Phineas understood his sister's voice in a way few producers could, because he knew her from before that voice existed in the artistic world. He knew what emotions she wanted to convey, what kinds of sounds represented her, what songs could come out of her in an authentic way. Together, they worked in Phineas's bedroom, without big studios, without top-of-the-line professional equipment, without the backing of a record label. Just the two of them, a computer, some instruments, and an unlimited number of ideas. They recorded songs purely for pleasure, for the simple desire to create something that hadn't existed before. It was in that bedroom that a song was born. A song that Phineas had composed thinking about his sister's sensitivity, and that they uploaded to an online music platform almost without thinking about it. They had no great expectations. They had created it with a very concrete and very simple purpose, so Billie could use it as the basis for a dance choreography. But the internet has its own logic. The song began to be heard, then to be shared. Then it went viral. Its hypnotic sound and the delicacy of Billie's voice caught the attention of thousands of people who didn't know her at all, who had no reason to listen to her beyond the fact that something in that music touched them inside. The unexpected success reached the ears of the music industry, and what had been born in a bedroom ended up becoming a record deal. From the very beginning of her public career, Billie adopted a very particular visual style: baggy clothes, long t-shirts, sneakers. An aesthetic that radically distanced itself from the stereotype of the female pop star, from tight dresses and carefully constructed images meant to display the body as part of the product. This choice was not superficial nor a simple marketing strategy. It was deeply personal. Over time, Billie openly explained that she wore loose clothing to prevent people from commenting on her body. She wanted to be heard for her music, to be judged for what her songs said, and not for her physical appearance. She wanted to build a connection with her audience based on something real, something that didn't depend on whether she met the beauty standards the industry often imposes. It was a brave decision. In a world that constantly demands that women, especially artists, present themselves in a certain way, deliberately choosing not to do so means facing criticism, misunderstandings, people who don't understand why you don't align yourself with what is expected of you. But Billie stood by it, and that cost her something too. Success came quickly and forcefully. Her first record project was well received, and it led her to go on tour, putting her in front of audiences who already loved her without ever having seen her in person. But fame has a side that doesn't appear in headlines. The constant pressure, the anxiety, the depression, the feeling that everything you do is being watched and evaluated without pause. Billie didn't hide that weight. She turned it into art. Her debut album was largely recorded in her brother's bedroom, with the same logic with which they had started everything. Two people who knew each other deeply, creating something honest. The result was a global phenomenon. The songs connected with millions of people because they spoke about real emotions: fear, sadness, anger, vulnerability. It was not music manufactured to please, it was music that came from a true place. And then something happened that Billie had probably imagined in her wildest childhood dreams, when she listened to her idol's music and wondered whether someday she might feel for someone. Something like that. Justin Bieber, the artist who had been her great reference since she was a child, collaborated with her on a remix of one of her songs. And not only that, Billie was able to meet him in person. To understand what that moment meant, you have to go back to that girl who grew up at home listening to music, who found in Bieber's voice and songs something that spoke directly to her heart. That meeting was not just between two artists. It was the closing of a circle that had begun long before Billie had a record deal, before anyone knew her name, before there was even a career to tell. Over time, the confidence Billie had been building through her music also began to be reflected in her image. Her style evolved. She started experimenting with new ways of dressing, showing a more mature version of herself, one that no longer needed to hide to protect herself. It was not a sudden change, nor a decision made lightly. It was the natural result of an internal process, of someone who had been through enough to know who she was and feel good about it. This transformation was not only aesthetic, it was the visible sign of something deeper, a person who had learned to inhabit her own body, her own history, her own identity without asking for permission. Billie Eilish's story is not that of an artist who got to where she is alone. It is the story of a family that bet on a different way of educating their children, of a brother who became the most important collaborator in her life, of a girl who found in music a way to survive what she could not control, and of moments that seemed impossible, and that happened anyway. Her parents believed in her when there was still nothing concrete to believe in. Her brother was there in moments of creation and also in moments of crisis. And she, for her part, had the courage to remain faithful to who she was, even when the world offered her reasons to change. If there is something her story tells us, it is this: that people who go far almost never go alone, and that the path, although it is not always the easiest one, makes more sense when it is walked with someone.